Something has really stuck with me since the very beginning of this podcast. As leaders, it's important to acknowledge something. The invisible work you do, the stuff that can't be measured, isn't always seen, and yet holds the team together. The consideration that goes into our presence, attitude, and behaviours may not seem like something we've put much thought into, but our brains are working overtime, constantly analysing the situation to try and determine what our response should be. This stuff is really draining some days, especially in the beginning. Finding the balance between showing what you need to show and staying connected with your authenticity can be hard. I'd rather put effort into something I feel good about or at peace with than something that damages my integrity and creates a burden too big to bear. Just because we know what to do doesn't mean we're not putting any energy into it. More than that, we can be intentional with this. We can make deliberate and purposeful choices that align with our values and long-term goals. Completing tasks can be learned by anyone, but the invisible work, that's something special. Hey, welcome to the Leaders Podcast with me, Laura McDonald, the leadership coach and mentor. Come with me as I explore the elements of leadership that give leaders like you the power and confidence to make the impact you know you can. I'll be sharing my own experiences, top tips and insights, and talking to some very special guests to share their thoughts and leadership experiences on mindset, influence, change, and growth. So let's get right to it. We are back after a long and well-deserved summer break with new guests, new topics, new ideas, and for the first time ever, we'll be doing roundtables coming very soon to the Leaders Podcast. Thank you so much for listening and coming back. I've had a great but very busy summer, and now I'm swinging back into the rhythm of things, and I've got a ton of brilliant episodes coming your way. I thought long and hard about what this first episode back should be about. I hope it resonates with you, and I've seen a lot of it in the last few months. Something has really stuck with me since the very beginning of this podcast. It was the first episode I ever recorded, although it was episode 2 in the end, where Nicole Weiner talked about her old boss who had to make some redundancy decisions, and she overheard others making comments that included the words cold and heartless. But what those people hadn't seen was the challenges that person faced in making those decisions, the emotional struggles they'd endured, and the personal impact it had. In many cases, those words rear their ugly heads regardless of whether the relationship was good previously. But as leaders, it's important to acknowledge something. The invisible work you do, the stuff that can't be measured, isn't always seen, and yet holds the team together. Redundancy is obviously a difficult scenario for anyone, but there's plenty more work going on that contributes to successful teams, engaged members, and achievement of goals. Of course, experience is important in this. The more experience you have with certain situations, the easier you find it to make decisions, play your part, and support others to play theirs, right? Knowledge of your staff is another factor. Your ever-growing knowledge and understanding of the subject, your team members, the wider support network, the business, the market, the customers, and so on will all contribute to the decisions you make. But so does your attitude, your approach to problem solving, your general behaviours, your strength of trust, communication and teamwork you've been able to foster, and critically, your ability to do the invisible work in the background. A few years ago, I had a leader who seemed to have it all together. She was encouraging, positive, always giving us what we need to do our jobs, and was always reassuring us that we were meeting goals and targets. What I didn't realise until one particular situation occurred is just how much work she did protecting us from the unnecessary. I'd done this for my own teams before, but it was extraordinary. Among other things, she was literally battering goals down to reasonable with the people above her, so we weren't stretched beyond our limits. And initially, the goals were ridiculous. I sat down and did the calculations and realised there literally wasn't enough hours in a week to get what they wanted done. And yet she managed to negotiate down to what we could manage. And that was something I saw her do several times. Witnessing that made me incredibly grateful for the effort we didn't see her put in. It made me want to do a great job for her. But the price leaders often pay for this kind of background work is burnout, high stress and anxiety levels, feelings of loneliness and fear of crumbling under the pressure, because they're trying to do it all on their own. You don't need support every minute of every day. As a leader, you do need autonomy and independence and a certain level of capabilities that allow you to do your job. Otherwise, you probably shouldn't be there. But having a tailored network of structured support can help mitigate a lot of those potential consequences. Your team might not see what you're doing, but that doesn't mean you have to do it alone. My clients are doing their invisible work with me, talking about things their teams will never hear, because this invisible work is mostly on themselves. They spend our time together analysing situations, experiences, and responses to learn and understand themselves better so they can lead more effectively without compromising their sanity, their personal life, or their values. I remember speaking with a sponsor some time ago after my first meeting with a client, where my immediate feedback was the urgent need of a complete reset. It was blazingly obvious that the client was already burned out, hiding too much of what they really did in their role, and was channeling all of their energy into micromanagement, all directions they did not want to be heading in. What made it even worse was the impression that gave off was absolutely the last thing they wanted others to think of them. Now, a holiday doesn't fix everything, but that was step one. Step two was understanding. Step three was demolishing the old. Step four was building the new. And step five was solidifying those habits, structures, and practices so they could build more of what reflected who they were deep down as a leader and make good on their own values and leadership vision. This client and everyone else that works with me has put or is putting in the graft on themselves, and their teams often remain blissfully unaware. But this work is crucial to their connection and influence with their teams, and therefore what and how much of it they're able to achieve together. And there's so much more that exists. So I want you to celebrate it with me and learn how to be more intentional about your invisible work. This episode is a tribute to the kind of leadership that doesn't always show up in metrics, but leaves a lasting impact. I've spoken a lot about emotional intelligence on this podcast, both my solo episodes and with guests. But what I haven't spoken about much yet is emotional labour, the volume of effort you put into managing your own emotions, reactions, and expressions. Classically, this is often deemed as the mask that a leader wears, suppressing their own emotions to present one more acceptable or influential to those around them. I don't know about you, but I find this quite difficult, not to accomplish, but to feel aligned and authentic with. Leaders absorb so much stress, have so many doubts about themselves, and deal with so much else from themselves and everyone else that the last thing you need to be doing is creating more things for you to stress and doubt about. As a naturally very honest and open person, hiding how I truly feel about something can feel wrong in some way, like really wrong, making the emotional labour feel 10 times heavier than it should. So I often put my effort into deep acting rather than surface acting. Because if I can genuinely change my opinion, see a different perspective, or highlight an opportunity from what's happening, I'd rather present that than a false emotion. That's not to say that surface acting doesn't happen, but for me it's certainly a minimal occurrence. And I have 3 principles that support me in minimising the potential negative effects on me. Don't lie about how you feel. Encourage wider thought where possible. And if necessary, say nothing. Finding the balance between showing what you need to show and staying connected with your authenticity can be hard, but it's worth the time and energy you put in. I'd rather put effort into something I feel good about or at peace with than something that damages my integrity and creates a burden too big to bear. I mean, after all, you have so many other decisions to make in a day, right? And it's not always clear to us just how many decisions we make, or how taxing those decisions really were. You'll often hear plans and ideas coming down from above, and you'll immediately start thinking about who in your team would be best to make it happen, or who's going to get the chance to step up and stretch themselves, or what you need to step in front of before it even gets to your team, and sometimes when you need to push back. Then there's all the other day-to-day scenarios you face, like when to intervene in that call or that conflict, how to phrase that feedback in a way that's going to motivate the other person to do better or maintain their good performance, how to be efficient in your own tasks so you have more time to support others in theirs. All these micro decisions we have to make in a day are overlooked regularly. And that's before we even consider the ethical dilemmas we face. Am I really the right person to deal with this given the biases I might have? Who is the priority here, the individual or the team? When, how, and who do I share this information with? And to top that off, there are endless trade-offs. Do we go for the immediate gains, hoping we can pull back in the long term? Or do we go for the long term without many short-term wins? We only have so much budget. Where do we spend it? And what is the sacrifice we're making from those decisions? And a core question so many leaders are having to face right now. corporate social responsibility versus demands of key stakeholders and investors. So many of these decisions don't make it to the staff meeting or the weekly newsletter, they're just made in the background, and you're the one carrying the weight of all those choices, or at the very least, you're having a say or some influence in them. That weight needs management, so you remain able to stand up straight. Seeking wider perspectives, exploring strategies like greatest good for the greatest number, and prioritising long term goals and strategies for sustainable, ethical future will make it lighter. But for all the things these strategies aren't necessarily appropriate for, spend more time listening to understand before running to the decision. Effective leaders start by effectively leading themselves, and a big part of that is the recognition of how much happens for us. If we are effectively leading everything we can see, but we're not acknowledging the 50% of our energy that's been spent without us even thinking about it, we're often left completely befuddled as to why we feel so drained despite knowing we're doing our best with what we can see. And consider the value of it all. If you weren't making all these hard choices, solving all those problems, doing all this invisible work, how able would your team really be to do their own jobs? It is a weight to have all this on your shoulders. It is up to you to manage it. But acknowledging its value and importance is just as paramount. What do you do to build and maintain good relationships with your team, with your peers, with your leaders? Some things might seem obvious to others, right? You take them for lunch, or you remember their birthdays, or you say hi and goodbye to them every day. But what about all the quiet work you do? When you check in with a team member to make sure they're coping with their workload? When you notice a small shift in someone that might indicate burnout? Or when you make the effort to publicly show you've followed through on your word? You're fostering trust in your values, ethics, your care for others, your unwavering support for those around you, and your willingness to be part of the team rather than separate from it. These aren't sentimental things, they certainly aren't fluffy. They're strategic, necessary actions you take to build stronger connection with your team and show you do actually care about them and how they're doing. That lunch you took someone out for might seem really surface level to somebody else, but it might actually have been to get to know them better, or to discuss an idea they had, or to let them get to know you better so they build a deeper sense of trust with you and commitment to your vision. I always say no one can make you care about other people, that has to come from you. But making others understand that you care requires visible action that might not be clear to them initially or at all, but it will lead to a deeper impact that draws them into the mission and vision of your team and makes them want to do that great job for you, just like my previous leader and many others I've worked for. A great example of this was actually towards the beginning of my career. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, we'd just finished closing up the kitchen, and my manager came in to check to make sure that everything was okay and sign it all off. And I asked her one question that delved into a really, really, really big answer that, okay, I was probably a bit too tired to deal with, but at the same breath was so needed. And the fact that she put the time and energy in to tell me that was more valuable to me than if she'd just waved it off to the next day, or if I had. All I asked was, what do you consider to be a perfect close down? And for the next 2 hours, I was running around the kitchen with a cloth in my hand and a bottle of sanitizer, cleaning every last thing that she spotted. She was just as tired as I was, but her attitude was, if you're willing to put in the work, I'm willing to put the work into you. You might already be the leader that's learned how to build that strong connection through these subtle actions. You might even feel more committed and motivated yourself by doing these things, and that's great. It might not even feel that taxing because you genuinely love to do these things. But if you love to do these things and you have a clash of your own personality, like your introverted nature telling you need quiet time, you might feel a little more drained even though you know you've done the right thing. That's okay. You just haven't learned all of what you need to feel energized across the board. Even for the extroverts among you out there, stressful days still happen and you might still check in with that team member or follow through on a promise, but it will feel a little harder on the days of crisis, big business decisions, change or conflict. To then include all the identity management we do in this can really bump up the pressure. In my episode with Taz Bamji in Midsummer, we spoke about the constant discovery of personal versus professional boundaries when it comes to how much you share about yourself to maintain authenticity without compromising privacy. But I recently attended an event giving me a wider perspective on a word I knew needed to be included in this, but isn't always talked about enough: credibility. One of the guests lined up for an episode coming soon will certainly be speaking on this, but credibility has a big link to our authenticity. because how we're seen as credible relies quite heavily on what we share about ourselves that makes us credible in the first place. It's not about how much we share, it's about what specifically we share. Further to that, we then have to be on brand, both with ourselves and with our organisations. And sometimes it can feel like everyone is watching and listening to see if we're truly aligned with it all. All this then contributes to the most impactful thing we do every single day: influence. Our tone, our presence, our consistency, our mood, our language, our energy all shapes team behaviour more than delegation and instruction ever could. If we're positive about something, the team will likely be positive too. If we use language that's dismissive of others' decisions, our team are likely to undermine that decision in the same way. If we put a half-assed effort in, our team will likely do even less. And if we come in optimistic, energetic and supportive, our team will likely take those behaviours and use them with each other, generating a more impactful and further reaching result. The consideration that goes into our presence, attitude and behaviours may not seem like something we've put much thought into, but our brains are working overtime constantly analysing the situation to try and determine what our response should be, and if all that pans out, great. Everything I've said so far is the reason I strongly believe that leadership-specific development is necessary for everyone that steps into this role. This stuff is really draining some days, especially in the beginning. And if you learn behaviours and strategies that don't align with who you are, how you function, and support your own well-being, because that's the example you've been set, and others make you feel like, well, I'm coping using this, why aren't you? You're on the road to burnout before you even know you've got in the car. That belief of leadership-specific development was the backbone for my Learn to Lead training program. This isn't the standard program that teaches you about finances and HR and marketing. That's management, and your organisation can do that. It's their area of expertise because they know your business better than I ever could. This program proactively develops your self-awareness and relationship management, your motivational skills, strategic leadership approaches, your personal brand, authenticity and credibility, and gives you actionable tools and strategies to use from day one so you lead with all the impact you know you can make without compromising your sanity, values, or personal well-being. If you want to join the program, there's an open cohort starting in January 26, and there's a 10% discount available to anyone self-funding. Details of how to get that discount along with early sign-up bonuses are in the episode description below. If there's one thing I'd ask you to do today, it's be kind to yourself. Whether you're having a hard or an easy time of it, because look how much you really do in a day. Give yourself credit for just how much you truly accomplish, and then acknowledge that it's okay to not want to make a decision on dinner when you get home sometimes. But if that's your everyday experience when you get home, do something about it. It's okay not to be okay. What's not okay is choosing to stay there. The invisible work you do as a leader drives your team's successes and your own while building a whole lot of connection and influence in the background. A lot of the skills we use to do it are skills we've been developing our whole lives, and thankfully that means a lot of the work seems simple. So it's really easy to forget that our brains are still working, our bodies are still working to get it done. Just because we know what to do doesn't mean we're not putting any energy into it. More than that, we can be intentional with this. We can make deliberate and purposeful choices that align with our values and long-term goals. And the more aligned we are, the more engaged we can get our followers. There are 3 actionable steps you can start taking today to help you become more intentional about your invisible work. It's not enough to know that you do all these things. Strategically monitoring, processing, and analysing the impact of your own behaviours, habits, language, actions, and reactions can greatly inform you on how to build stronger connection and influence with your teams, while also supporting you to carry the weight of all these things standing up straight and with ease. First off, never underestimate the power of journaling to record all the invisible decisions you make. Bringing those decisions into the light can increase your confidence and credibility because now you're seeing everything you're doing. I sometimes work with people looking for their next role, and the most common barrier to their confidence in applications and interviews is not believing that they have that many skills. They give a basic job description and not the experience they have, which isn't actually very likely to get them very far. Explore those micro decisions and then link them to specific skills, knowledge and behaviours you have because of the decision you made, but more importantly, how you made that decision. Secondly, Create space for emotional decompression. Some people do this on the drive home. I used to sometimes. On certain days, it was really easy for me to crank up the radio and start blasting out some sort of song on the way home. Back in the day, it was a good old Celine Dion. But not everybody can use that time for this reason. But not everybody can use that time. Some people actually find the drive home really stressful. So space when you get home is needed. Sometimes you might also need that space at work. So create small blocks of space to decompress throughout the day, particularly after what you know will be a challenging time. Giving yourself that freedom to process what's happened can relieve stress and anxiety, can help you switch off from work when you get home, and refocus your attention to other parts of your life like family, friends, and hobbies. Third, and I mentioned this already, create a network that will be there when you need it. Don't do this alone, and don't leave it until your head's already under the water to reach out. It's never too late to reach out, but the longer you leave it, the harder it will be when you need it. So create a network of support, diversify it to people outside of your organisation, and use it to acknowledge and celebrate all the invisible work you do more than you will do reaching out for support in tough times. If you haven't paid that much attention to your invisible work yet, make all three of these practices the first intentional actions you take. If you're already trying to be intentional, use these actions to elevate it. I mentioned earlier that sometimes I work with people seeking new roles and that I help them discover how much they really do. A few years ago, I was suffering with serious imposter syndrome because I believed absolutely nobody would take me seriously as a leader because of the industry and company that I came from. When I moved into the education sector, I got to see other leaders in the roles I held in the same industry doing half of what I did, in some cases less. I also got to see other sectors and realised how much I knew and was able to pass on to others. That was a huge, huge confidence boost for me. When I was made redundant, I started updating my CV, which, to be honest, had never really had that much of a proper go over. And I suddenly realised I was going to have to start cutting it down because I'd had that much experience. I'd written that much in my CV. At one point, I think it was 5 pages long, and that was just the last 3 jobs. But most of what I'd written came from the exploration I did of my invisible work. Completing tasks can be learned by anyone, but the invisible work, that's something special. When I look back at all the teams I've worked with, I'm astounded at how much some of these people have achieved. Some teams have set records that have stood for more than a decade. Others have discovered what their real passions are and scattered off to be successful as the individuals they are. We inevitably move on in life. But to watch some of my former colleagues become business owners, senior executives, others moving across the world to build the life that makes them happiest, and some just doing great exactly where they stand, is all I could ever ask for. I won't take credit for what they've done, it's them that's done it, but I'm aware of the influence I have on others, and that what they achieved when we worked together, they did together. All of the stuff they didn't see from me, they still felt. Most important thing I could do was continuously and intentionally learn and grow. I have certainly never been a perfect leader. I've had those days that projected the wrong perspective onto others. I've had my moments where it's clear I'm not happy when I needed to change my mindset. But what I've come to learn about those days is that if your team can say it's a one-off, it's out of character, or it's not your usual self, it's okay. They recognise that's not the running theme of the team. And they'll help you reset and come back to the table with clarity. They understand you're human at the end of the day. They are the very start of your network of support. They shouldn't be called on often, but if your connection and influence is strong, they'll be right there when you need them. And if you want my support to make your invisible work more impactful and intentional, look for the details in the description below. So the next time you say you don't really know what you do, look at what's happening in the background. Pay attention to those micro decisions, that emotional labour, the relationships you're quietly managing, the invisible influence you're creating with that identity you're shaping to align with your values. You might just find you're doing a lot more work than you think. So here's to all the invisible work you do. The stuff no one sees, but everyone feels. Until next time, everyone.